Welcome back to Girl at the Con. Thank you so much for joining me. Today is going to be a kind of a different video. I have been watching a lot of stuff on this book festival that some are equating to Fire Festival, and a lot of over-promising and under-delivering, and it was just not good. So let us take a look at how not to put on a con. The A Million Lives Book Festival was held in Baltimore at the Baltimore Convention Center. It was supposed to be a indie author, mostly romantasy sort of book convention festival where people would come and meet these more indie romantasy authors, get their books signed, go to panels, typical sort of convention stuff. That is not, however, how it went down. I want to start by talking about how far in advance you should be planning a convention if you're going to plan a convention. At bare minimum, you need to plan at least a year out. Now, that said, if you are planning a first-year convention, maybe like a year and a half, 2 years out, so that you have time to get the word out. So you have time to let people know about your convention and what's going on. When you start planning 2 years out or a year out or whatever, the very first thing you should do is figure out everything that you're going to need. Gonna need a venue space. We want to do a ball, so we're gonna need a DJ, all this stuff. Figure out what you need and then go through and make a budget of how much you're willing to spend. Now that budget, of course, is going to go up or down depending on what kind of deals you get. Maybe you find a DJ for super duper cheap. Maybe you find a vending hall that is slightly more expensive than you were expecting. You need to be able to adjust for all that. Once you set that budget, you then need to look at what you are going to be charging people to come. And you should never be expecting, especially in the first year, to do any better than break even or to have enough money to seed the next year. Around, we'll say like $20,000 if you get up that far. So once you've sort of got your budget taken care of, then the next step is to find a venue. When finding a venue, it is very important to look at the number of people that you think are going to show up and have it. If you want 1,000 people for your first convention, you need to probably drop that much lower. It is very rare that a first-time convention has thousands of people. I've only ever seen one convention two, that have done so well in their first year that they exceeded expectations. Like, they were almost turning people away at the door because they just did not have the space. I've only seen that, like I said, 2 times in 30 plus years of doing convention work and being in the fandom. I've only ever seen 2 conventions that blew people away with how many people showed up. So because you are a first time, romantasy can be kind of niche. If you're not advertising well, you may not get a bunch of people, but always plan for a super low number. Once you've planned for that number, figure out what kind of space. As a first year convention, I never would have booked into a convention center. Convention centers are insanely expensive, like stupidly expensive. I believe the San Diego Convention Center starts at something like 60 or 70,000 for renting like a hall and some meeting space. But you can get almost an entire hotel for less than that, depending on the hotel. Booking into a hotel is probably the best way she could have gone as opposed to a convention center, just because hotels tend to have better space for smaller conventions. And if she had just been blown out of the water, ended up with a bunch of people there, next year she could have gone to the convention center. But for a starter convention, I always recommend a hotel. It's just a lot better. And some of the issues that she had would have been solved, but put a pin in that, we will get to it. The next thing after getting the hotel and securing your dates is to secure people to come and to start advertising. In a first-year convention, the biggest part of your budget outside of the venue should be advertising. And I feel like this woman, her plan was to get all of the authors on board, and then their fan base would come and they would do the advertising. Yeah, that is a good way to do some advertising, but not, if I have 100K subscribers and I say, hey, I'm doing this event in San Diego between this time and this time, come and see me. There's no way all of my people are going to come see me. They're just not going to have the funds to do it. They're not going to have the availability or whatever to do that. So you'll maybe get 10% of my people, but more than likely you're only going to get a very small fraction of those people's fan base and followers. It is much better to, especially when you're doing indie authors that aren't going to have a super huge fan base, I think it would have been a much better idea to invest in advertising. Advertise on Book Talk and BookTube. One of the things that I like is D&D, and I follow a couple of D&D channels on YouTube, and they get sponsored by these little indie press publishers that are doing little indie press book. I have seen so many of those people and their Kickstarters advertising, and that's where some of her money should have gone. She should have gone on BookTube, found people that specifically work in indie and romantasy, and see if they could sponsor their video, because that would have gotten it out. I don't live in Baltimore, but certainly, if it had been in San Diego and one of the booktubers that I follow had posted something about that, I would have considered going, even though I'm not kind of in that genre, because it just probably would have been an interesting thing to go and do. Not at the prices she was charging, but, if you do that advertising, you spend that money on advertising, you don't have to charge $50 to $250 for tickets, which was ridiculous, especially for what people ended up getting out of it. It was stupid. Also put a pin in that. We will come back to that. Because what you get, let me stop. Just put a pin in that. We'll come back. So I would have spent a bunch of money on advertising. It sounds like every single author that was there was an invited guest, which is, what's the word I'm looking for? Not smart. That's just too many. Just absolutely too many. So I would have done way less than that. It would have been smarter to only invite 4 or 5 guests. You say, hey, come out here and I will pay for your hotel and give you a small per diem per day. Per diems are a food allotment, money for food allotment. Do 1 panel, a talk or a reading, whatever, for your book. And, you'll be a featured guest. We'll put your name up in a bunch of different places and in our advertising, so on and so forth. That would have been, all she needed is 4 or 5 guests. It appears that what she did is invite everybody as a special guest and said the same thing to everybody. You just can't afford to house 20 people for a weekend, It doesn't appear that she offered them per diems but she offered the hotel rooms, and then they had to pay for booths and stuff like that. As an invited guest, I think there's some negotiation that you can do on all of that. Maybe they're like, hey, I'll pay for my hotel room and my food. That's not a problem. But, the cost of your vendors' booths are pretty pricey. Can we, do that instead? Or can we do the vendors' booth instead of the per diem and whatnot? She could have done that. And that's the other thing that's coming into your revenue, into your budget, is not just ticket sales, but it's booth sales. Ideally, what you want to do is your ticket sales should be covering like the cost of the venue and everything. And then like your booth sales should be your profit. You want to make a profit, but like I said earlier, your profit your first year should be non-existent. You shouldn't be expecting to get one. And if you get one, you should be using that to seed the next year's convention. I just don't see where her budget was. I feel much like what she was doing was just not sustainable. Now, the other thing that happened was when these vendors needed to know how many people were coming so that they could have the stock that they needed to accommodate X amount of people, it would appear that she lied to them and said that there were 500 people coming when she had not had 500 people buy tickets. I haven't heard an exact number of people who came, but one of the vendors, one of the people that was there, said about 20 people, which is insanely low. Like, you're not turning a profit, your convention's done, unless you personally have money to do this again. You're not doing another convention. There's just not a market for it in your area. We're pretending that she was doing other advertising, book talk, booktube, all of this stuff to get people to come. You go on a morning show. You reach out to all your local news stations to find out which one will actually, host you to talk about this thing. And you go on that. You will get somebody. You will get those stay-at-home moms that read romantasy. You're going to get those working women who read romantasy. You're going to get gay and straight guys who read romantasy. I know that they're out there. It's not just women. Like, that's another way to advertise, and you're advertising for free, essentially, because those morning shows aren't going to charge you. They want the content. So the worst that's going to happen is, there's a shooting or explosion or something awful happens and you get bumped for the more interesting story. But by and large, you can get on and you can advertise for those, and it's free advertising. There's all sorts of advertising, and I feel like that's where she broke down the most, is she didn't advertise. I'm going to get into the actual convention stuff that happened at the convention. Had she done the stuff I talked about, the convention would have been so much better. So we have to talk about ticket costs really quickly. The tickets started at $50 and ran all the way up to $150. It's kind of pricey for a first-time con. I would say $50 for a general admission ticket that only really got you into the vendors hall is stupid. I know I'm going to say that a lot during this full thing, but it's stupid. If I were attending, I'm not into romantasy, I'm not into any of the other stuff. I'm just going because it looked like an interesting event. $50 to just be able to get into the vendors hall where there's around 100 authors would be too much for me. I am paying $50 so that I can then spend more money. No. The next tier up would have been $100 or is $100, and that got you the ability to go to the panels. I'm assuming that these ticket prices are for the weekend, because otherwise they are insane. Just absolutely insane pricing for day passes. So I'm assuming that they're for the weekend. I had seen an article that had said that on Eventbrite, which is where they were selling the tickets, that tickets ranged anywhere from 40 and up. So I'm assuming it's 40 a day, 50 if you get the weekend. That's still way too expensive. I would have done 25 to get into the vendors hall. Like, if you just want to go and shop, you don't want to go to any panels, you don't want to go to any events, you just want to go and shop. Great. Here's a $25 wristband. Have at it. Even then, $25 seems a bit pricey, but I would have done that over not, because you want people to come. You want the vendors to get traffic. Now, my understanding is the next ticket up from that was $100, and that got you the ability to go to panels in addition to going panels and a couple of other events, such as like cosplay meetups and stuff like that, which cosplay meetups are typically free at every convention I've ever gone to. They're not a planned event, they're just there, unless it's like a masquerade. But even then, those are usually, it's all just part of the ticket, the general admission ticket. So it's dumb. Keep saying that. Gotta find a better word. You get your ticket plus, and you can go to the vendors hall and you can go to these panels. Put a pin in that. I will get back to that. That's what that ticket got you. The next ticket up was $150. That $150 would get you into the Lavender Ball, which part of me feels really should have been inclusive. It was also, I think VIP was that was the intermediate level. It was GA VIP and then VIP with Lavender Ball. $50 to go to a ball, unless I am really super into it, I don't know if I would want to pay that. The VIP was also, I forgot to mention, was also supposed to have VIP swag bags, which is pretty typical. Anytime you buy a VIP ticket to some place, you typically get, if not a special badge, you get like a swag bag, and that's got a bunch of stuff in it. Like, it will have books, like signed books by the author. It will have fun little merchandise. I'm trying to remember what came in my last VIP bag. I've gotten patches, I've gotten pins, like the nice pins, not buttons that are stamped in a thing, but like, cloisonne type pins. I've gotten books, I've gotten comic books, I've gotten stickers, t-shirts. That's what I would expect out of a VIP bag. Put a pin in that, we will come back to that as well. So now that we've talked about everything, let's get on to the actual convention itself. When the vendors showed up, they had tables, but no tablecloths. Most of the conventions that I go to, where I'm at a convention center, don't have tablecloths or don't have tables at all. Because most of the ones that I go to have booths of some sort that they have set up. They have racks that pop up. I suppose they do have tables with tablecloths. I've just never paid too much attention to it. But if you go to a hotel, that's usually like included, like bog standard. You can definitely tell them that you don't want it, but I don't know why you would. It's usually included in the cost of getting the room and the tables and all of that. I don't know why they didn't have tablecloths, because, like I said, it should have been included. The floor plan was different. The floor plan is something that you have to clear with the fire marshal in advance. It's very easy to get on your fire marshal's website and take a look at what they're gonna want and then set it up like that. It's pretty standard. There has to be space for everybody to get out. So you can't just jam everything together. There has to be space. The last one I worked on, like, we factored in that space in how we did our grid. Each booth we had drawn like little rectangles that went in between each booth that indicated the space that the booth had to get out. So when we went to the fire marshal, other than one thing that I messed up on, it was, the fire marshal was like, change this one thing and you're good to go. It's super simple. Like, but the plan she had, you can just see, like, when you look at it, you're like, this doesn't seem right. And that's not just me as somebody who works in hospitality event planning. This was like, the vendors were looking at this floor plan. They're like, this doesn't seem right. Honestly, like, you can look at it and you can just very much tell that it's not right. So I don't know what that was. They got there. They didn't have their pre-assigned booths because last minute, she had decided that all of her problem people were going to be moved into a corner where she didn't have to see them or deal with them. This leads into a staffing issue. You should not be the only person running your convention. You can be the only person running your ball or your party, but ideally, a convention needs way more than just one person, because that's too much for one person to deal with. She should have had a specific person that only dealt with the vendors, so that as a vendor, like a vendor hall manager, that person emails everybody, makes sure that they have everything that they need, make sure that the hall is set up the way it's supposed to be, and everybody goes into the booths that they are supposed to be assigned to. For most conventions, you need staff. It would appear that A Million Lives did not have any. Possibly one, and we'll get to that. But it just appeared that the woman running it was the only person running it. And ideally, for your vendors hall, you should have a vendor hall manager or liaison or whatever you want to call them. This is the person that's going to plot out the vendors hall. They're going to make sure everybody gets the spot that they want or as close to the spot that they want. And then if any of those people are bitchy or complaining, that's the person that handles that, not the person who's running the show. If the person running the show is having to deal with everything, yeah, they're going to get that problemed people that they're going to want to shove in. These are people that were probably just asking for information. And if she had had a vendors hall manager, the vendors hall manager would have handled that. When we get closer to the end, I will tell you all of the staff that you should have for a convention. Because you should have not a lot of staff, but you should have more than just one person. One of the things that they had in the vendors hall that I really loved was they had a tattoo artist who was doing flash tattoos. And if you're not into getting tattoos, a flash tattoo is basically something that is pre-designed, and you go in and you say, I want B, and you pay for B, or 1 or 2 or whatever. These are my tattoos. They're both flashes that I got during Friday the 13th. I have bats and I have a cat and a moon. I think that's just a great idea. You go in, you can get something really romantic or fantasy or whatever. The tattoo artist had to have a specific space because she needed electricity to charge her tattoo guns, which my understanding were cordless, so they had to have battery chargers and stuff. And she needed a specific space to make it sanitary and so that she didn't get bumped or jostled or anything. Because nothing's worse than having somebody go zzz. Now you have a permanent mark on your skin because somebody bumped the tattoo artist, or if they're doing detail work or line work or, oh my God, it freaks me out, the idea of my tattoo artist sneezing or getting bumped while they're working on me. I would go insane. I would just flip out because it is so expensive to get tattoos. And to have to get a tattoo removed because somebody sneezed or got bumped into, just, oh, that freaks me out. Just, oh. She was put in a booth where she easily could have been bumped or had it become unsanitary. She also didn't get any power, which she was told that she needed. At one point, I guess she was working on a tattoo, and all of her equipment went dead because she didn't have it, just run out of juice. Thankfully, somebody was able to let her get past their booth or something to charge so that she could finish the tattoo. It doesn't affect her, in my opinion. I would not look at the tattoo artist and be like, this is your fault. No, I'd be like, why weren't you put in a booth with electricity? That's the convention. The convention should have put you in a booth where you could charge your equipment because you're doing something for the convention. Yeah, I'm paying you, but you're here because of the convention. That's on the convention. Event spaces themselves. When people were walking in to do their panels, if they remembered to show up for their panels at all, because they weren't necessarily given a schedule. I guess the schedule was online, but there wasn't a printed schedule there, which, by the way, a lot of places are doing away with their event books for cost of printing, for environmental reasons. I get it. If you don't have an app, you don't have the money to put an app together, put a sandwich board. I went to Fangia. They had a sandwich board that was out, and every day they changed the sign in the sandwich board to read what that current day's schedule of events was. You know, that's great. You know, you're saving yourself some money with doing that because you're only buying the cost of the sandwich board and printing of the signs. Beautiful. But you should print out little cards that give people their schedules. Or be like, hey, do you have your schedule when they go to check in? This is the schedules that we have. What's your panel? Oh, it's this. So make sure that that's in your book and on a timer and everything. Given how small it was, they definitely could have made announcements without the announcements being super intrusive. I say this because I went to Phoenix, I guess it's Phoenix Fan Fusion, but I went to it when it was Phoenix Comic Con. They had these super loud, super intrusive PA announcements, like every 5 minutes, about panel signings and panels and just all this stuff, that it was such a pain in the ass. You'd be talking to somebody and you'd have to stop talking because the announcement would go off and it would be so loud that you couldn't keep talking. I wouldn't do it at a big convention, but at a small little convention like this, where you've only got like 100 people in the artists themselves in the vendors hall, yeah, you could easily have done that. If they showed up to their panels on time, and a bunch of the panels were running late, there was no seating, there was no chairs, no tables, no sound system, nothing. And they had musical performances in addition to, like, people speaking on subjects. That's insane. That is insane. I find that insane for a couple of reasons. I don't know how the Baltimore Convention Center works, but typically tables and chairs are included in the cost of you renting those rooms from a convention center. The sound system is more, which is again why I would go with a hotel and not a convention center, because that convention center sound system is going to be a hell of a lot cheaper. Their lighting and everything is going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than a hotel, than a convention center. So yeah, it was nuts. It took them a long time to get chairs, if they got chairs at all. A lot of the stuff I've seen, you can see people just sitting on the floor conducting their panels. It was all just kind of crazy and nuts. I don't know why. I just don't know why. Unless, I will save that till the end. I just don't know why. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. After all of that comes lunch. We have to talk about lunch. Built into the schedule was lunch. It was like an hour lunch where everybody could leave. I have never seen that in a convention that wasn't geared at professionals. Like, I do a lot of science, marketing, healthcare, all that stuff. I do a lot of those. I do a lot of what you would consider like corporate conventions versus like fandom conventions. And in those, a lot of those, especially the more conferencey ones, will have like a lunch break for like an hour or whatever. But usually the convention is giving them lunch. It's like a little box lunch. You exit out of your room that you're in, and there will be a table that will have coffee and tea, sometimes soda, sometimes water, and it will have like little boxed lunches. Or in the case of some medical conventions, they have what are called product demos, where you go into the product demo and you get lunch. You, again, usually just a box lunch. And to get that box lunch, you have to watch the demo or the thing that they're talking about. Like, I've never seen it in a convention like this. This seems not smart. Not like not a way you would do it, because typically at conventions like these, a vendor wants to have lunch. Hopefully they have an assistant with them. They will go out, or they'll talk to people around them and be like, okay, we've all decided that we're going to get food, right? We're going to send I'm going to watch Bobby Joe's booth, and we're all going to go out, and she's going to be the one, Bobby Joe's going to be the one that goes out and gets food for our row or whatever. They work together on things. Or it's going to be, I'm going to go, then you're going to go. That way we can watch each other's booths. And then the attendees will just go whenever they want to go. But again, because they were having this at a convention center, the convention center needs to be paid to supplement the cost of opening food vendory things, right? They're not going to open those if A, they don't think nobody's going to be there, and B, if they're not paid to do it. I know that the San Diego Convention Center, after the first couple of conventions back from the pandemic, they would open them and nobody would show up. And so what they started doing was charging the conventions. If nobody shows up, you have to pay for that, or you can pay ahead of time and we'll open it. That seems to be working, is they just don't open their things if people aren't there to buy them. That is what happened to A Million Lives. So everybody had to leave the building to go and get food, which is going to take longer than an hour if you're in downtown whatever city. Not every convention center is near other food. I can't recall what's immediately around the LA Convention Center, but I don't recall seeing anything when I was there last. I don't recall seeing like a Subway or a McDonald's or anything like that in the immediate vicinity. I could be wrong. I mean, LA can be very dense, and I didn't see all of what was around the convention center. It's a little bit of a walking distance to get to a Subway in San Diego. So the point really is that giving everybody an hour during a convention is just a fandom type convention like this is just really weird. Normally you just don't do it, because a hotel would have been much better because they typically have food inside. Some of the decisions made baffle me. Because of the way she had set it up with an hour lunch and everybody had to leave to go have lunch, the vendors were very uncomfortable because there really wasn't any security per se, and people didn't really have badges. So anybody could just walk in to the vendor's hall and take stuff. There have been some accusations laid that that is what the organizer did, is that she went in and she took stuff so that she could put it in something. I've never quite understood that. I heard so that she could put it in VIP bags. I've heard so that she could do something else with it. I don't know. But the point is, an hour to make everybody leave for some reason is just so weird. You just don't do that. Like, everybody has to figure out their own food at their own time, period. The other thing that we should probably talk about is badges. There were none, which, again, just boggles the mind. And you would have had, if you'd done this right and you had staff, you would have had a staff person who did registration. They would have done any of your special guests that weren't going to have booths. You know, they, like, if you had somebody coming in to do a talk, I come in and I do panels all the time. I usually get what's called a professional's badge or a media badge for that reason. When I'm just going to do stuff for my YouTube channel, I usually go and ask to get a media badge or a press badge because I will be covering the convention. As small as my channel is right now, I still, you know, will try to get that depending on the convention. Some will let me, some won't. And then your attendees, they would handle all of the attendee stuff. They would be the people that'd be like, oh, we have X amount of people who've already bought tickets. They're gonna know the numbers. And they would have been the ones to order the badges. Now, supposedly, she ordered the badges and all the badges broke, which I don't know what kind of badges she got. I've never had a badge. I've had badges break, but I've never had them break ahead of time, if that makes sense. So I work a lot of conventions and I do registration for a lot of conventions, so I've handled a lot of different types of badges. The one, you know, you get the placardy ones. Those, like, you have to, like, really, like, bend them to get them to break.
Okay, I need someone to tell me how you can break things. Let's play with it a little bit. I'm not... How do you break this? There's no easy accidental way for this to break. Did she run them through a wood chipper? How the fuck did she break over 100 of these?
She didn't. She didn't want to pay for them, so she never ordered them in the first place.
And then you have, like, the little square ones where you would print out something, you'd insert it. Those, again, like, the little holes that you snap on your lanyards to, those can break. I've occasionally taken them out of boxes before and had some already broken, but we're talking, like, 1 or 2 out of 500 versus like 1,000 badges or 500 badges or however many she ordered arriving broken. I've never seen that. And if that happens, you call the place that you ordered it from and you're like, hey, what the hell? Every single one of these is broken. That's not cool. You need to give me my money back right the hell now. And then, you know what you can do? This is amazing. Are you ready? You can go to Office Depot and you can buy a label printer. Bam. Bam. Peel off the back, stick it on, you're good. So many. I have one. Costs like $200 and I have like a roll of like labels and they peel off. And so you run it through. It hooks up to mine's an HP, so I have like a specific HP program. And I just sit there and type into it. It prints out a badge that has your name on it, and you can add stuff to it. So you can print it out and have it say, Melissa Jean Meyer, VIP. Or you can have it say, Jimmy Sherfy, vendor. Or whatever, invited guest. Or you can have it say, name here, vendor invited guest, you know, so that it has everything on it. And they can just slap that on and go about their business. You could have fixed that. It could have been fixed before the show. Like, if they all showed up broken, she could have easily run out to Staples, bought a label printer that prints out sticky badges, and fixed that, like, right then. But she says that this is why nobody had badges, is because they all arrived broken. Some people had wristbands. I didn't quite understand what the wristbands were for, but, you know, I've watched a couple of different videos about it, and I've read a couple of different articles, and I still don't understand what the wristbands were for, but whatever. There are ways to work around that, and I don't understand how the badges broke. We have to talk about the ball. This is another one where booking into a hotel would have solved this problem real easy. Because when you book into a hotel, they would ask, like, what are the events that you're planning on holding while you're here? Oh, you want to do a ball? Okay, so, and you, obviously we don't want to clear out the vendor's hall, so we're going to need another place to have it. You need a separate room. Okay, we've got a ballroom that can accommodate that. It's already going to have lighting. Also, a hotel is going to have carpet everywhere. As where a convention center will only lay out carpet if they're paid to lay out carpet. And there was no carpet, so there was no cushioning. Everybody was just on concrete. Except for, I think, the meeting rooms had carpet. But a hotel, all their ballrooms, all their convention space is going to have carpet. The convention itself, A Million Lives, had their lavender ball in a convention room, or convention floor room. So it was just straight concrete. There were no tables, there was no dance floor, and there was no lighting. Apparently, the DJ canceled last minute. Again, you run out to Staples, you buy yourself a speaker, a Bluetooth speaker, you hook that up to your cell phone or to something, and you play music through it. Yeah, it's not going to be great because you're not going to have a full sound system there, but it's something. But if she had done it in a hotel, there would have been carpet. The banquet staff would have been like, hey, you're doing a ball here? Okay, this is what we recommend. You're going to need a couple of table rounds for people to sit. I usually split table rounds, which are like the big round banquet tables, and then I usually do a couple of cocktail rounds, which are the taller ones that just you can't sit at, you stand at. I usually do a couple of each, and I don't mean like 2 or 3 of each, but I usually do a couple of banquet tables and a couple of cocktail tables that people who, like, they just want to eat their appetizers or their dessert and have their drink without, like, you know, filling up their hands and then go back out on the dance floor, they can do that. But people who want to, like, sit and talk and enjoy the music and vibe, they can sit at the banquet rounds. And, oh my god, and they would have provided tablecloths. So everything would have looked really nice, because it's bad for the hotel to not have any of this stuff because they look bad. That's what I mean. Not to mention, a lot of hotels these days, part of their discounting system is either food and beverage or room nights. You book X amount of room nights, we'll give you a discount on your convention space. Or you spend so much in food and beverage, F&B, that they give you a discount on the rooms, right? This ball would have been a great way to do that F&B, that food and beverage, because you would have wanted the bar, right? But then you would have wanted sodas. I probably would have, they also apparently did have desserts, but you have like a big table of appetizers and desserts. So if somebody is feeling a bit more savory something, they can have that. If they want a little bowl of pudding or a tart or whatever, they can have that. I would have done that and the bar, which they said it was going to be host bar. A host bar means that they're going to pay for it, the convention would pay for it, and a no host bar means that you have to pay for it. She could have done, a host bar would have for sure like killed her F&B budget, depending on how much everybody drank. A no host bar, generally you have to make X amount, or the hotel has to make X amount, otherwise you have to pay for it on that. But either, doing that and doing hors d'oeuvres and dessert would have probably more than covered her F&B budget to get the discount on the rest of the event, if that was what that hotel was doing. So I just don't understand why she didn't do it at a hotel. But anyway, supposedly the DJ, we need to go back to this. Supposedly the DJ quit. I don't know if she ever actually hired a DJ. There's a lot of stuff where I'm not sure that she ever did it, because a normal convention would have had different people running each thing. I have been a special events manager before for conventions, where what I did was talk to the hotel and set up our F&B and what kind of tables that we needed, and we needed a dance floor, and we're going to want a sound system, and we're going to want the lighting to be a certain way, and oh, you have extra lights that will kind of, cool. If not, fucking Party City, man, you can get, or Amazon or whatever, you can get real cheap lighting things to kind of like sell your event or whatever. I've done all of that. I've been registration manager, so I know how that works. I have done everything at a convention at some point, so I know that you should have separate people running it. And it very much appears that she did not. And the evidence in that is somebody was supposed to be hosting or moderating the BIPOC panel, and nobody was there except this one guy who people have identified as her husband. And he basically stood in the corner and looked kind of grumpy and pissy the entire time. My guess is that he was roped into this and he didn't want to be there and he didn't want to do it, so he wasn't gonna do it. He was gonna be there for his wife, but he wasn't gonna do shit else. And it doesn't appear that he did. I'm inclined to believe, because she didn't have special events, she didn't have a program manager, she didn't have a vendors manager, she didn't have a registrations manager. Because she didn't have all of these people, and there were no volunteers, which is a completely different subject that for another day. I feel like she was doing this all on her own and didn't realize quite how much it was going to take for one person to do all of this stuff. It is possible, but it is not going to go well. You need people to handle each and everything, unless you're having an extremely small event. That is, even then, I have handled one day extremely small expos. I still had a team, at least a team on site, to help me do everything that I needed to do on site. It would have made more sense. She got no friends that she can call up and be like, hey, Sarah, I really need your help. Can you do this thing for me? Like, even if she perfectly ran everything pre-con, she would have, at bare minimum, needed to have called friends and had them come down and help her do the stuff on site. We also have to touch on sponsors, because sponsors are becoming very important when putting on an event. It very much helps to defray some of your cost if you can get a sponsor, which means you need to make a sponsor deck, and it needs to be pretty good. What a sponsor deck is basically a list of sponsorship tiers. You say, hey, for X amount of dollars, we are going to put you on some of our advertisement. Like, if you're super low, your name is going to be small print. It's just going to be your name, and it's going to say, Judah Publishing That's it. Now, the next tier up is maybe you get it's still just your name, but it's a little bit bigger, and it says Curzon Publishing. Maybe you get, and with that tier, you get social media posts. By the way, anybody sitting there thinking, oh wow, social media, you can go on, you can get apps and programs that will allow you to upload all of your stuff, if you're running an event like this, all of your images, and say, okay, so we're going to link our Facebook, our Instagram, our Twitter, and I don't know, Threads together. We're going to link all of that together. So when I post to this app will immediately post out to all of our social medias, and then you can schedule it. So I'm going to make 50 things that say, hey, we're so super excited that Amazon Fresh is going to be one of our sponsors, right? And it's got a thing, and it's got Amazon's logo, and we're, some artwork and whatnot. And you post it, you say, okay, I want this to go out on Friday. And I want this to go out a day later, and it's the one for Dr. Pepper or whatever. You don't want it to clog up people's feeds. They don't want to be like, ugh, God, here's another thing from this convention. But what you want to do, if you don't have a lot of time, is take one day to sit down and just do a bunch of them, and then set them to auto post every 4 days or every 3 days or whatever, so that everybody sees your stuff. That's super simple. Or you can get a social media manager. When you're doing a small convention, and I've worked for small conventions where I have had multiple roles. I have done this, and this. I've had my title looks like I'm a princess or something, where it's like Melissa was special events manager, volunteers manager, ADA coordinator, and something else, but I can't remember what it was, for this one convention. I had 5 things I was doing because they were short staffed, so I did some people can do that, but the point is you have to have people to help you. But you can post that stuff, and your sponsor deck should have everything, and your top thing should be, if they're a large enough sponsor, let's say they are Random House Publishing. Random House wants to get behind this convention, right? It's going to say Random House Publishing presents 1,000 or 1,000,000 lives. And they've got the biggest thing. It's got their logo on it. It's above everything else. And then, you have all the lower tiers. And you want to give them something in addition to them just giving you money and you putting their name over stuff. And your sponsor deck is going to read what you're going to do for them. You're going to put them above everybody else. It's going to say the highest tier sponsorship is going to be, let's say, $2,000. And it's going to say, Random House presents this thing. Your name is going to be listed on everything. Your logo is going to be listed on stuff. You can put books in the VIP bag, or you can have a sponsorship just do the VIP bags, right? Like the actual bags, which nobody got because I'll get into that in a minute. Certain sponsors do certain things. You can have a sponsor do different things depending on how you line up your sponsorship deck. Your top one is going to be the one that pays the most, and so you are going to do the most for them. That is going to make it still be cost effective for you. You're going to put their name on all of the posters and printouts. On the badges are going to say, if one side of your badge is artwork and it has names, then and you're doing a certain type of badge, then maybe the backside just has a list of all the sponsors, and at the very top sponsors are going to have logos, and the very bottom sponsors are just going to have their names. There's so much you can do with sponsors and give to sponsors by just adding their name stuff, because what they're paying for is to get their name out in front of a bunch of people who are coming to this show. And it helps defer your costs. It helps you have more money to do stuff. If nothing else, I would have gotten a sponsor for the ball. I don't know who I would have reached out for this, because I've never put on a book convention. I've never even been to a book convention. So I don't know who I would reach out for that. You can also reach out to local places too. If they give you X amount of money, or even if they don't give you money, if you go there, let's say Subway is down the block, and you reach out to Subway and you're like, hey, can you sponsor us? Even if you give us 100 gift cards, you can give those out in the gift bags. It's something that you can do. You can reach out to sponsors, if nothing else, than to put their stuff in those VIP bags. I know she didn't do that. There was a sponsorship tier, and somebody did sponsor. It just went wrong like everything else. I will just put it that way. The DJ was a security guard who went home and got his speaker. He shouldn't have had to do that. She should have gone off and done that. I can see where people were like, I want my money back, because they should have gotten their money back. This was extremely poorly planned. I don't know if it's a scam. The more and more I look at it, the more I'm like, I don't know if she did any of this out of spite. Or not out of spite, maliciously. She's young. She's like in her 20s, early 20s. Yeah, the lavender ball didn't go off super great. And the vendors didn't go off great. A lot of this would have been fixed had she had help to put it together, to run it on the day of, and had she done it at a cheaper venue, such as a hotel. She also very much over-promised. She told a lot of almost every single vendor, my understanding, was an invited guest. So she had to house over 100 people, which is an insane amount for a first-time con. Typically, you don't want to house more than 4 or 5 people. You only want to have 4 or 5 invited guests, period. You only want to have maybe like a couple of invited guests. You have maybe this X amount of whatever. But these people were all paying for their tables, but were told that they would have their hotel rooms comped. There's a better way to do that. Just 100% a better way to do that. She did everything wrong that she could have done. And I don't think it was a scam. I think she bit off more than she could chew. My understanding is she put on one successful event prior to this, and it was a ball, which honestly you can do on your own. That's what party planners are for. Party planners, that's what they do. They put on parties on their own by themselves. I don't think she realized how much extra work it takes to put on a event, like a convention event. You need to have, if possible, a staff for every department. And that's your programming, your registration, your vendors hall, and then your special events. Some of that can be combined. Like if your vendor hall person is good at doing the special events, then they can do that, because some of those she only really had one special event, and that was the lavender ball, which, doesn't sound like there was a whole lot to it, and she definitely could have probably done that and made it really successful. But I think because she didn't do any of the other stuff she needed to do to make this event successful, she didn't have the money to make that one good. I think time got away from her. She either didn't start it soon enough, definitely didn't know what it took, and then she may have just put some of it off. I understand that she's also a mother. And I know that that can take up a lot of time. Not, for any awful reasons, but kids, kids get sick and you've got to. I don't know how helpful her husband is. I'm not going to speculate on their marriage, but, she's got to do dishes and laundry and all this stuff. And it can very much, if her only real job is planning these events, it can very easily get away from her. And I think that that may have been what happened, because planning a convention takes a lot of work. I really think that she didn't plan well enough. She overpromised people way more than what any convention would offer. Most conventions are not going to offer everybody accommodations. They're not going to say, you're a featured writer and you're a featured writer and you're a featured. It really seems like every vendor in the hall was a featured writer, and that's a lot of hotel rooms. I'm going to slide over the ADA issue because I'm going to assume that I'm going to be polite and just assume she doesn't know how ADA works, because that situation is a whole other bag of worms. New day, because my camera died, my set fell down. Really want to say that this was poor planning. I think that also she is the type of person who has always made excuses. I failed my math test because Jenny had my textbook. I don't think she's ever really had to take responsibility for anything. Now she's finally doing that and being forced to take the consequences of what happened here. But I don't think that it was a scam. I think that it was just extremely poor planning and a refusal to say no or to cancel, to look at it and say, I messed up, this isn't going well. She didn't do that. She didn't just take the L. She persisted because she was going to be right, or whatever her mindset was. I don't know. But it did not go well for her. I'm glad that I'm hoping that she is learning from these consequences. And I hope that you will learn from this as well. What I have laid out, my steps, are not necessarily in order because they're in order of how I talked about the convention. That said, here's how you should do it. As I've mentioned, you're going to need to start planning at least a year to 2 years out. And that is going to be figuring out what you want, where you're going to have it, and all of that. Then you're going to work out a budget based on that information. Then you are going to find a venue. Once you have find a venue, then all you have to do is set everything out in a timeline and start working out what you're going to do next, which hopefully is going to be advertising and inviting guests. When I say make a timeline, set it down. This needs to be done by this time. This needs to be done by this time. The badge people, find out how long it is going to take for them to print. Find out how long it is going to take for signs to be made. Find out all of that stuff. And then set it up in a timeline so that you have dates and times when you need to turn that information in to make that stuff happen. Talk to your venue. Find out what they want and when they want it. If you're unsure about something, talk to your venue. Say, I'm not sure how many people I'm going to have for these panels. Can we maybe look at a smaller room? Can we maybe look at a larger room? Things like that. And then set that into your timeline as well. Talk to your vendors. When do they need to have stuff? When do you want to get all of the vendor information so that you can start advertising that? Set that up. Set up when you want to start selling tickets, when the deadline for ticket buying is going to be, that kind of thing. And then if you set up that timeline, everything will just fall into place because you will be looking at, when is my next thing? Okay, I've got to get this done by this time. Or I'm looking at having this thing finished by this time. And it just makes it so much easier. You also need to have staff. that is not a grumpy husband who doesn't want to be there. Find people, your friends, anybody who is willing to help you run stuff at the convention so that you are not the only person there, so that they can help with registration, so that they can check in on the vendors, so that they can answer questions, whatever. You need to make sure that you have staff. So those are my tips. I really hope that this was concise for you. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed making it. It is kind of my first long form video. Please, if you've made it to this part, tell me if you think that it is Fire Festival or DashCon. I'm interested in your opinion. I will see you in the next one.